So, topic for today is success strategies for choosing a franchise business. I do this with the assumption, which is not always correct, that you've seen the even more basic webinar on Franchise 101, if you want to call it that. Um, so, if you haven't seen that, you may have some questions about what we're going to talk about. So, please, as Diane has already mentioned, please, I love it when you ask questions. I can't possibly anticipate everything you're going to want to know, so please jump in with your questions. Very quickly, I am Richard Bock, and I have been in the franchise world for 27 years now. I was the owner, and I learned about franchising as the owner of a local franchise. I used to own two Huntington Learning Centers, um, and I sold those in 2020. Before I sold them, I became a franchise consultant, helping other people evaluate franchise business ownership. And I did that in no small part because of I would see a lot of people come into the franchise world and be very successful. It was very successful for me financially, personally, in every respect. But I also saw people come in who weren't successful, and I quickly came to the conclusion that the reason was for their failure was usually because they didn't know what they were getting into. They bought a franchise maybe for the wrong reason, the particular one that they bought. So as a franchise consultant, I help people find what I hope will be the right franchise for them. And that's what we're going to talk about today, strategies for finding it. There is a belief out there in the public, I'm sure you two don't have it, but there is a belief out in the world that you pick a franchise and you're going to be successful. And I can understand why that is. There is a lot of success and a lot of good news in the franchise world. You probably all have heard of the company J.D. Powers, and they do satisfaction surveys all over the place. There's a company called the Franchise Research Institute, which does that kind of satisfaction surveying for the franchise world. And I apologize, this is last year's report, which is the most recent one that I have. And if you look at things that I would suppose be important to you if you were a franchisee, you see pretty high ratings. So if we look here, my franchisor responds in a timely way to my questions and minor problems. Am I getting ongoing support? 88% of the people said yes. Are they focused on joint success? And this is a hallmark of a good franchisor. They're as concerned with the franchisee's success as much as they are with their own. 91% of the respondents said yes, my franchisor. So this is a survey of franchisees. 91% said yes, my franchisor is looking for shared success. What about communication more broadly? Are you able to, as a franchisee, are you able to talk and communicate well between not only the home office, but also amongst other franchisees? 96% said yes. And then finally, and I think to me the most powerful thing about franchising is that all the franchisees in a given system are looking for mutual success. We don't compete with one another in the franchise system. We're looking to support the brand across the board. 98% of responding franchisees said yes, my communications with other franchisees is helpful. So this sounds great. I think you should run right out today and buy a franchise. But it's not all that great. Not every franchisor is this good, and not every franchisee is happy. So it does take work and it does take research in order to find the right franchise. In the world's best system, if I introduced you to the franchise system that I think, based on my 27 years in this world, in this franchise world, if I introduce you to the one that I thought was the very best, what you're going to find in that very best system is 20% of the franchisees are above average, 60% are average, and 20% or below average. Success does vary. It varies based on, we can give you the very best system in the world, but if it's not one that you're comfortable with, if it's not one that you personally are attuned to, you're not going to be one of those top performers. So again, it speaks to the issue about picking the right one. What I see happen, and I see it almost on a weekly basis, people will reach out to me and they say, I'm interested in XYZ franchise. It's like going to a vending machine. You know, you walk up to a vending machine and there's lots and lots of choices. And as you look at those choices, you go on what your gut says. You go on what emotion says. You go on what your short-term thinking says. In the franchise world, people do that. They pick the brand that, well, maybe I shop there. You know, I'm a customer of that brand, so I like it so much, and it's such a good experience for me as a customer. I would like to own it I would like to be a franchise owner. Or maybe I have a family member, a friend who's successful in a given franchise, so I should do that. Or maybe I think the economy is going in a certain direction, and therefore being in that industry would be the best place for me. We're picking the business in those cases. We're picking the business based on what other people experience, or based on what the business does. It's an interesting fact that people actually, and we'll talk about this in a minute, people generally speaking don't pick a franchise to make money. It's not that it's not an issue. It's usually the second or third issue. Usually picking a franchise is about lifestyle. And that's a really important lesson for you to know, is that there's a lot of ways to make money. A lot of franchise systems, the majority of franchise systems, if you're good at it, you can make good money. But there's not a lot of ways to make you happy. And really, that's the theme for today. It's not about making you money, it's about making you happy. So with that in mind, let's talk about the first strategy. And poor Diane hears me talk a lot about how you start a business. So whether this is about a franchise business or about just something that you're going to start from scratch, I believe strongly that the purpose of owning a business is to accomplish your personal goals, to give you the life that you want. It's not about making money. It's about establishing goals and then finding a business that's going to help you accomplish those goals. So let me just give you a couple of examples so that it can make clear what I'm talking about. When I talk to my clients and we dig a little bit deeper into why they want to own a business, the things that I most typically hear are, I want a better work-life balance. I want more flexibility in my schedule so that if I want to go out and be a chaperone for a trip to the zoo with my children, I can do that. And if I want to see them in a school play, I can do that. And if I want a 4-day weekend, I can do that. Or if I want to take off every Wednesday morning, as I do, to play golf, I can do that. I want control of my life. We can find a business that does that. I have a level of income, so money does play into it. I want to make some money. So not every franchise will make the same amount of money, so let's find the one that will accomplish that goal. I've lost my job in the past through no fault of my own. So I'm looking for career independence. I'm looking for security because I don't want to be the victim of the next downsizing or the next corporate buyout. I want to have control over my professional life. Very common thing. I want to have a legacy for my family, for my children. I want to build generational wealth. I have retirement goals. I want a business to help me with retirement goals. Pick the one that's your goal. Fill in a different goal. Not every business will accomplish every one of those goals. So it's a question of really finding the business that's going to help you accomplish your goals. Don't just buy a business because you think that's where the economy is going. buy it because it's going to accomplish your goals. Um, Other considerations when you're doing this and matching up what's a good business for you. We're going to talk about professional skills and professional experience in a minute, but you certainly want to make sure that your personal skills, your personality is going to be a good match for that business. So giving that careful consideration. And one of the things that I do with all my clients is we do a personality profile, and then we match that personality profile up with businesses that are going to be a good fit for that. And then again, something that we'll talk about more in quite a bit of detail. The SBA will tell you, the Small Business Administration will tell you that 50% of small businesses will fail within 5 years. And they'll further say that they failed because of poor capitalization. I think it's a little bit more complex than that, but what it comes down to many people is they run out of money before they start making money. So making sure that you can, the emphasis is on the word safely afford the business. That it's not going to, that you're not overextending yourself and putting yourself and maybe your family in jeopardy. Once you do know what you want the business to do for you, then my recommendation is that you go out and you find 3 or 4 franchises that match your goal. Don't start off with, I want this franchise and let's see if it matches. Build the goals first and then go think it through and find franchises that the owner's role will be what you're looking to do. So don't look at just one. I suggest you look at least 3 and learn about them and pick from some options. I would also suggest that you consider different industries. Accomplishing your goals doesn't have to be franchise specific. It might be, you know, if you have a particular passion for pets, you know, you like working with dogs and you want to have dog boarding or you want to have dog training. Okay, that's one thing. But if you're looking for a business to accomplish your personal goals, then look at it in different industries. You can do that. And then the single most important thing to your long-term success is doing comprehensive due diligence in which you compare and contrast different policies, different processes amongst those different franchise businesses. Make sure that you understand what you're getting into through a comprehensive due diligence process. We're going to come back to due diligence and talk about what that actually looks like. So this is the place where I catch my breath. I apologize to everybody. I had COVID almost 2 months ago now, and I still haven't fully gotten my chest cleared up, so I'm still coughing and losing my voice. So I'm going to catch my breath and encourage you to ask questions. But I don't see any yet. So
no questions yet, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to our second strategy, and it relates to what seems like a logical assumption. Because if you look at owning a franchise as a career move, and of course it is, then the normal way we think about our careers is we're looking for a job, we polish up our resume, and we make sure that we communicate to a potential employer all of the things that we're able to do for them. And if we don't have the skills and the experience that they're looking for, we don't get the job. So it would be natural to assume that in the franchise world, the franchisor is looking for the same thing. Reality is quite different. The reality is that in the franchise world, only 25% of franchisees, the local owner, only 25% of them are in the same industry that they were in when they were employed. I left 25 years as an automotive executive. I worked for Volvo. I was working in Europe. I ran all the European countries for them and came back and bought 2 learning centers. They didn't look for me to have experience in that world. So in the franchise world, there are 3,600 brands in 90 industries. Regardless of your professional experience, you could go into any one of them. The reason for that is strategy 2. Work on the business, not in the business. Again, this applies especially, it certainly applies to franchising, but even if you were starting from scratch, I would encourage you to try to not get involved in the day-to-day tasks that actually generate the income for your business. Work on the business, manage the business, don't work in the business. The franchisors, the franchise world, the franchisors can teach you how to run their business. They have a system that's working for 400, 500, 1,000 people around the country. They know how to teach you how to run that business. I often use the example of a painting franchise. Again, poor Diane hears this so often. But I use the example of painting franchises. I've helped a number of people get into painting franchises, and not one of them has ever touched a paintbrush. When you buy a painting franchise or any other franchise, you're going to be running a business. You're not going to be doing the business. So the second strategy is to separate what the business does from what the owner does. I have seen many people get confused with this, and they get into a business and they realize that what the business does is not what the owner does, and they don't like what the owner does. And they fail, not because they can't do it, but because they're unhappy with it. So focus on working on the business, not in the business, and understand and accept that you don't have to have experience. The franchisor can prepare you to run that business. So that is your strategy number 2. Okay, so no questions, so please consider those. There's a document that you may have already heard about called the Franchise Disclosure Document, the FDD. And in that document, which is broken down, the paragraphs or sections are called items. And in item 19, there is, in almost every case, there will be a breakdown of gross revenue, how much money is coming into the business, by typically top quartile, third quartile, fourth quartile, second quartile, and so on. So it's broken down, and you'll get an average, and you can see how much revenue the franchisees are bringing in. Be careful with that information, and don't assume that you're going to make that kind of income. Remember what we talked about earlier. Best system in the world, 60% in the middle, 20% on top, 20% on the bottom. And you can't assume that the franchisors are going to tell you how much money you're going to make, because they don't know. They can't possibly know. I mean, they're striving very hard to make sure that they're only bringing people into their system who are at least average, if not who are going to be at least average, if not above average. But if an individual doesn't implement properly, they're going to be in that below average group. So the franchisors are not going to tell you how much money you're going to make net. Gross, they can tell you that. They can tell you, everybody in our system, this is the distribution. This is what the bottom 20% are generating, and the middle is generating, and the top is generating. They can't tell you how much you're going to make, which of course is what everybody would like to know. You can and will get tools from them. You'll get what's called a pro forma, which is simply a profit and loss statement template. It'll have all the accounts, all the income accounts, all the expense accounts listed down, all the formula for calculating your yearly, monthly, and totals. But there won't be any numbers in. The revenue numbers you can get from the FDD. The expense numbers they're not going to give you, because that's how well you're managing the business. But you can use this document to project what you think your financial performance is going to be. And now here comes the important thing. This is the strategy part of this. Once you've done your projections, go out, contact existing franchisees, contact past franchisees, and talk to them about a lot of things. I usually give my clients 30 generic questions that they could be asking people. You want to be talking to existing franchisees about what's a day in the life look like? Is the training program really as good as they say it is? How do the computer systems accomplish the business goals? And do you think that this is a reasonable amount of money that I'm expecting to make? Is my pro forma, is my projections for revenue and expenses, is that reasonable? Um, the FDD includes contact information for every franchisee in the system and people who have left the system. Use that information. Certainly use it to help you figure out what your financial performance is going to be. And I would also encourage you to review that information and your projections, perhaps with an accountant. If you have an SBDC counselor, they are certainly capable of helping you evaluate your projections. But talk to other people unless you really feel comfortable that you're comfortable with making financial projections. You have experience in this. I would suggest you seek outside help and talk to existing franchisees. Still no questions. I'm going to keep haunting you until you finally ask me one. So moving on through the financial issues, comes the question of what is it going to cost me to own a franchise business and how much debt am I going to be taking on? Well, in terms of how much is it going to cost, the range of investment in the franchise world is tremendous. It is a very broad range, as this chart shows you. And what this is demonstrating is for those 3,600 franchise brands, how much does it cost to open the doors? How much does it cost to open up your business, and not operating expenses, just the cost to open the doors on day one? And you see that there are franchises in that will fit pretty much every budget. I can tell you that most of my clients are in this from I've only had one client hit the $1 million range. I've only had maybe 2 or 3 in above 500,000. Almost all of my clients are in that $250,000 to $50,000 range, and there is a tremendous number of opportunities in here. And then if you add up to 500,000. So you get a sense here of what the investment is. However, and I think this usually comforts people. So that's what the investment is. But one of the things that you should understand is that there isn't a correlation between how much you invest and how much you make. Okay? The size of the investment is driven by the nature of the business, not by the income. So if you want to own a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A, and I hear about Chick-fil-A all the time because it's such a great experience, people think they want to own it because they have a great experience there. Well, you're going to need over $1 million to open up Chick-fil-A. However, if it's just a question of income, you can open up one of those painting franchises that I was referencing a minute ago for about $160,000, maybe even less, and make more money than you would at a Chick-fil-A. The difference is, if you want a Chick-fil-A, you've got to put up that great big building. You've got to buy all the equipment, the freezers and the cookers and the fryers, and the parking lot has to be constructed, and all those big signs have to be. And if you open up a painting franchise, where you're never going to touch a paintbrush, and you open it probably from your home and eventually go into a small commercial space, and that's your whole investment, that and the franchise fee. So the investment, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You don't need to invest a lot of money to make a lot of money. Two completely different topics. So your fourth strategy is about funding. How much debt should you take on and funding? The first piece of advice I would give you is conserve your cash. Don't use any more of your liquid capital than you absolutely need to. If you're a very prudent person and on a personal level you don't buy anything that you can't pay for today in cash, God bless you. That's a great way to be. I wish I could be that way. But that is the right way to run your personal finances. It's not the right way to run a business. That's what banks are for. That's what lenders are for, is to use other people's money to get your business started. It takes you a long time to accumulate cash. If you use it up, it will take you a long time to replace it. And if you don't have cash, a bank won't lend you money. So protect your cash. Second point in this strategy is to develop your investment projections using the franchise disclosure document. The franchise disclosure document will tell you that to start up our franchise, it's going to cost you between X and Y. That range may be pretty large because if you open up a business in Bethesda and I open one in Hagerstown, probably is going to cost me less money to open it. Costs are different in those two different locations. But there are other things that go into it. The FDD, conveniently enough for you, will give you an itemized breakdown of how much of the things that you're going to need to purchase to get your business open. Everything that you're going to have to spend to get the business open will be laid out for you. And you can use that to adapt it to your local marketplace. Again, you're going to have to project what you think it's going to cost to start the business. Get as much help here as you can. Again, you may want to talk to an accountant. Again, you may want to talk to an SBDC counselor. But I would again strongly encourage you to talk to the existing franchisees. These people love to help people who are thinking about joining the system. So take advantage of that. Third option, or third consideration here is don't just go to your bank and see if they do SBA loans. There are a variety of ways that you can fund a business. With Diane, I run a webinar on how to fund your business. Lots of different options for you to use. Look at all of them and pick the one that's best for you. The best funding option is a very personal thing. Depends on your situation, your tax situation, the nature of the business, and so on. So look around and find the best funding option for you. We're going to talk about liquidity in a little bit. Liquidity is about having cash on hand for emergencies. You want access to as much money as you can get in case of emergencies, in case of opportunities that arise on a short-term basis. And so I would suggest that you also consider establishing a line of credit to give you that cash reserve, to give you that buffer for working capital. Typically, a franchisor is going to list in that startup investment that we talked about a minute ago, they're going to list down one line item is going to be for operating capital, and they'll typically tell you a number for 3 months. My suggestion is that you get access. You don't have to have the money in your savings account or your checking account, but you need to have access to, I would say, 6 months of operating capital. And then finally, in terms of debt strategy, find the Goldilocks amount. You want something that's not too little and not too much. You don't want to run short. As I said before, the SBA tells us that the biggest reason for small businesses to fail is poor capitalization. They didn't get a big enough loan to carry them through the startup. On the other hand, you don't want to drown yourself in debt, especially when SBA loan rates are probably on either side of 9%. So you want the Goldilocks amount. Not too much, not too little. So that was number 4. All right, still no questions. I'm very impressed with myself and how effectively I'm informing you about this. You don't have any questions. Um, working capital, also known as liquidity. Um, this is the single biggest consideration in whether or not a bank is going to consider funding your business. So strategy number 5. So the reserves, the liquidity, is about having enough money to cover first your business expenses for 6 to 12 months, as I already said. And that means, if you have a bad month, and you don't hit your revenue target for that month, your employees don't care. They still want to be paid, and the landlord doesn't care. They still want the rent, and the BG&E doesn't care. They still want you to pay the utilities bill. And so you need to have reserves to cover you in the hopefully something that's not going to happen, which is you can't pay all your bills, and you do need some kind of reserve. Again, franchisors will tell you 3 months. I would say 6. A really prudent financial advisor would say 12. So if it's going to cost you $10,000 a month to turn the lights on, to pay your people, to pay what you have to pay every month, regardless of how the business is going, you should have access to, I think, at least 60,000 and maybe 120,000. So this is another reason to be paying not only attention to your reserves, but also pay attention to what the operating costs for a given business is. You don't want a business that has very high fixed expenses. The other thing that you need to consider is, how are you going to keep a roof over your head? Most businesses, franchises, and others don't make money right away. Without knowing a business, without knowing a person, I generally say you should assume that you're not going to break even. You're not going to have more money coming in than is going out, maybe for as much as 12 months. There are businesses that take longer. There are businesses that take shorter. Franchise businesses generally get to break even faster. Lots of reasons for that. Than starting something from scratch. So you're still in a better, almost always, you're going to be in a better condition with a franchise system. But you're not going to be taking a paycheck for some period of time. How are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to keep food on the table? If you can't answer those 2 questions, where's the operating expenses for the business, and where's the personal living expenses, a bank will never give you a loan, and a franchisor will never award you a franchise. So you need to have some strategy for accomplishing that. You also need to make sure, amongst the other things that you have to pay every month, is if you've taken a loan to get your business started and you have a month that doesn't go well, the bank doesn't care any more than the landlord does. They want their money. And so this also covers your operating needs and the unexpected. We get a hurricane, your business floods, you're out of business for some period of time. You've got to have a way to cover your expenses. So, very important that you do this. I would suggest that when you are talking to franchisees about doing it in part of your due diligence, you're talking to existing franchisees, that you ask them how they funded their business. Did they take a salary, and how, if they did, how did they take a salary before they broke even? So, how people get through this startup period, how people finance operating expenses, talk to existing franchisees. It's the single biggest strength you have in doing due diligence in the franchise world, is that you have franchisees who have already done this, who will be happy and willing to talk to you about how they did it. Again, as I've already said, understand that liquidity is the bank's number one consideration when you're looking for loans. And so talk to experts about this, accountants, SBDC folks, and so on. That was number 5. And number 6 relates to how long you will be an owner. When you buy a franchise, you're signing a contract for a certain period of time. The franchisor is saying, we are going to give you the rights to represent us in a market area, and we're going to train you how to run this business. We're going to make an investment in you, and we're going to give you the rights to sell our products or services in that area. And in order for us to have a satisfactory relationship, in order for us to recoup our initial investment in you, we need you to sign a contract, and typically that's going to require you commit to 10 years, a 10-year term for your franchise agreement. It is a renewable term. Again, typically some will be less, some will be 5 years, some will be 20, but almost all will be 10 years. And then you can always, as long as you're meeting all your responsibilities, you can renew for another 10 years. By the way, if you're in somebody else's building, if you're leasing a building, more often than not, these days, it used to be 5 years with the term for leases, but more often than not, leases are also looking for 10 years of a commitment. So you shouldn't go into franchise business ownership thinking that, well, if it doesn't work out after a year or two, I'll get out of it and I'll do something different. You need to consider that this is going to be at least a 5-year commitment. Now, the reason I'm not saying a 10-year commitment is because you are able to sell your franchise business. What you can't do is just walk away. If you just walk away and say, oh, I'm done, I'm not going to do this anymore, you're going to have a financial consequence to that. You can sell the business if you decide you want to get out early. But number one, you don't want to sell a business before it's doing well, before you've really, brought it up to the speed that it's a desirable business to own. So that takes time. And in addition, you can't just sell a business overnight. You've got to find the right buyer who can afford your price, and is looking for your kind of business in your area. So it doesn't just happen overnight. If you're planning on being out in 5 years, if you're planning on being out at some point in the future, you need to give yourself probably a 2-year plan for how you're going to make that happen. One way to deal with this is to consider succession planning, so that maybe you mentor an employee and help that employee get prepared to take over your business. Maybe you turn your business over to a family member. Very often, not uncommon at all in the franchise world, for other franchisees, neighboring franchisees to buy your territory. That could be a succession plan. But you need to talk to those people, and you need to know that that's going to work for them as well as for you. And then finally, if you do want to sell your business, you should be aware that the franchisor will have to approve that sale. They want to make sure that the person that you're selling it to can be successful. There are also costs, fees that you're going to have to pay the franchisor if you want to sell your business. Those fees are covering their legal expenses and their training of that new person and so on. So in the FDD and in the franchise contract, which is included in the FDD, you will find provisions for how you go about transferring your business to somebody else. So this is not a short-term thing. If you buy into a franchise system, you need to be committed to bringing it to success. Certainly be committed for at least 5 years of that 10-year term, and sell the business. Don't think that you can just walk away. Success number 7, an attorney. In my world, working with my clients, we talk about upfront the importance of an attorney. If I have a client who says to me, "Oh, I've read a lot of contracts over the years. I don't need an attorney to look at the franchise contracts," I won't work with that client. I think it's crucially important that you have an attorney look at all of the contracts and hire only somebody who has franchise law experience, somebody that has looked at 100 or 200 or more franchise contracts and understands how they work. Franchise agreements are very onerous documents. They're a bit one-sided. They are that way because for everybody's benefit, the franchisor needs to protect the brand. They need to have the ability to ensure that every franchisee is performing properly. And that's not only to protect the parent company, but it's there to protect the neighboring franchisees who might suffer if somebody is, not operating properly. You need a franchise attorney to make sure that, tough though it may be, it's okay within the norms of a typical franchise. So you do need an attorney to review this with you, not so much to negotiate the terms of the agreement because it's not negotiable, but to make sure that you understand what you're getting into and that that franchise agreement is consistent with the norms of the industry. Very, very important that you work with an attorney. So as I say, they're not negotiable, but franchise attorney will help you get to the proper understanding of your rights, your obligations, and anything that's out of line. That was number 7. Number 8, family involvement. I will, from time to time, it's usually men, will tell me, "Oh, I don't need to involve my wife in this because I make all the decisions in my house." And some months later, we find out that that's not true. If you're going to pursue owning your own business, franchise or otherwise for that matter, I strongly encourage you to involve everybody in your family and in your, your broader network of people who are important to you. When you start up a business, it's going to be all-consuming for some period of time. It's going to affect your family, it's going to affect your friends, and you need to know that, number one, they understand what it's going to be like and that they're supportive of that. So particularly if you have a spouse, I would encourage you to involve them as much as you can in your due diligence process and make sure that they understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what it's going to be like. I don't mean to put it in a rude way, but in the beginning, it's going to, no matter how good the system is, you're going to be working hard. Things aren't always going to go right. What you don't want to do is come home at night and have somebody tell you, "Well, I told you so. You decided you were going to do it. I told you so." You really don't want that. So make sure that your entire family is going to support you. It's very important to your peace of mind and success. Number 9, due diligence. As I said earlier, all the strategies aside, this issue, doing comprehensive due diligence, taking your time to really understand how the franchise that you're looking at works, is crucially important to your success. So what does that look like? Started off with what some of this we've talked about earlier. Defining your goals and your capabilities and making sure that that's going to match what the franchise is going to give you and expect of you. Consider more than one option. It's 3,600 brands, 90 industries. Why? And for the most part, you can do any of them. So why not take advantage of taking your time and trying to ensure that you're finding the one that's right for you? Typically, the first step is going to be having the franchisor explain to you how their system works. That's typically going to take you about 3 to 4 weeks of phone calls, webinars, reading, reviewing contracts, working with the franchisors representatives to help you understand how they say that it works. You want to make sure that you're reading the entire franchise disclosure document and eventually the franchise agreement, the contract, so that you understand all of the details that you're committing yourself to. Develop your financial projections and review them with other people, other experts. Once you've got all of that done, and when you think you know what your financials are going to look like, and when you think you understand how the franchisor says the business works, then you want to talk to existing franchisees and validate what you have been told or what you believe will be the case. The franchisees will, sometimes they're hard to get on the phone. They're busy people. They're running a business. But once you get them on the phone, you'll find them to be very, very supportive, very, very helpful, and very, very honest and forthcoming with you. Definitely want to use an attorney. You want to have an accountant take a look at your financial projections. Every expert that you need to involve is going to help you. You want to be looking at funding options. And all of this will lead you to a business plan. All too often, I've seen people develop a business plan because the bank says you've got to have one. And a business plan will include your financials, but they'll also include a competitor evaluation. They'll also typically include a marketing strategy and how you're going to do marketing. Your business plan will address how many employees you're going to need, where you're going to find them, how are they going to get trained. So it covers a good business plan will cover all the aspects of how are you going to make this business successful. Good news in the franchise world is that FDD is going to help you with a lot of that, but at the same time, you need to develop it for yourself and not just for the bank. The bank will require it, but if you do it properly, it will make sure that you have done the due diligence properly. You've crossed all the T's, you've dotted all the I's. A tremendously helpful source for you in terms of building a business plan is an SBDC mentor. That's one of the main things that they do. And you can also find on the SBDC website, you can find a business plan template. So if you do want to do it on your own, you'll at least have a structure to follow in categories, and they'll help you understand how to put that plan together. And then finally, for due diligence, be patient and thorough. Franchisor, if you come in off the street and you talk to them, they'll tell you that typically they get people going in about 6 weeks of what it's going to take to get you to sign the franchise agreement. In my experience, I can't remember the last time I got a client through that process in 3 months. I would say on average it takes my clients with my support 6 months, and I've had many clients that have taken more than a year. Don't let a franchisor rush you through this process. Take your time. It is the path to success. That was number 9. And then finally, and I hope you don't see this as an advertisement for me, but you may want to consider working with a franchise consultant. A franchise consultant, and BrandNet's the oldest. We invented the industry. We've been doing it longer. BrandNet is a franchise, so I'm the franchisee for Maryland and the district. But there are others out there, so I'm not just talking about myself. I think a franchise consultant can be a big help to you in all of this, whether it's matchmaking, helping you figure out what franchise businesses, what are the 3 or 4 in different industries that you want to look at, and then a coach to take you through the due diligence process. The role is similar to an executive recruiter. We get paid by the franchisors to bring them talent. where we differ from an executive recruiter is we just don't do the matchmaking. We do the matchmaking and then we coach you through that due diligence process. Um, uh, a franchise consultant can also help you find funding, can help you find a franchise attorney, can help you find an accountant, and so on and so forth. And as I say, um, at least in the FriendNet world, we do not charge for that service. Um, there's the advertisement. You're going to get a copy of this presentation, so you've got that background. I think the only important thing from this slide is, here comes the sales pitch, if you will. But FriendNet is the only franchise consulting group that is a national partner with the SBA, with SCORE, and with the SBDC. So I hope that gives a little bit of credibility to FriendNet. I'm going to leave this up for a second, but you'll get it in the copy of the slides. If you have a question, you can reach out to me, and even if you don't want to work with me. I believe this is not me trying to hook you on my services. If you've got a question about anything we talked about today or anything else about franchising, feel free to reach out. You can also use that QR code to get to a part of my website, which has got all kinds of resources, other webinars that you can watch about franchising and other business startup activities.